Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I have two special guests in studio today. I am joined by Chris Floyd, Deck Nine's game creator on Life is Strange Before the Storm. And also I have actor, writer, and, because this is a PlayStation podcast, the voice of Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn, Ashley Birch, joining us. Thank you both for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. It's my pleasure. This is a treat for me. I was excited about this interview for a while, so I want to start with something for both of you, and you can do rock, paper, scissors on who starts. The Life is Strange franchise, both the original run and Before the Storm, seems to have garnered almost like an instant following and had really gathered a community together. And I'm wondering why you think that is, and what about it kind of created this instant community. Who wants to start?
Should we rock, paper, scissors? No, you can go ahead.
Well, I think it's really down to the unique vision and the execution of that vision that Don't Nod had in the first season. I just think they did some really amazing work there, both visually and in how they drew their characters and the way they told their story. So that was, I just think, something that people didn't expect and felt new and different, and something you don't see very often in the video game landscape. And a lot of people were hungry for that.
Absolutely. Ashley, additional thoughts?
Yeah, I think that these are stories that you don't often get to see in video games, like Chris said, and I think it's a testament to the game and how effectively they were able to, and honestly and organically, convey those stories of these teenage girls, and also that, I think this is a sort of thing that gamers wanted, and I think we kind of assumed that maybe the only games that gamers want have to have like guns and zombies in them, and it's just not the case.
And guys with shaved heads. It's pretty common. We'll look it up. So do you feel like that setting that you just alluded to with following these two high school students' lives, I mean, is that what gave it a particular pull with a younger audience, and maybe an audience that is experiencing those same life events outside of time control? In
Although
their
who
daily
knows?
lives.
We don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I'm none the wiser for time control. What do you think?
I think it was that the story was told so authentically and that the characters were so well developed. The same premise could have gone, kind of gone sideways in different hands, but I think Don't Nod and now Deck Nine have treated this world and those characters with such care and consideration, and they feel really rich. And they also tackled subjects that I think were a little bit, could be a little bit darker or a little bit harder, and I think they did it with a lot of sensitivity and understanding of the implications of those things. And so I think the result is that you have this really rich, nuanced exploration of the life of being an American teen, and then also specifically a girl, and I think that because it was treated with such care and respect and authenticity, that people really felt seen by it.
Well, let me piggyback off of the authenticity note and posit to Chris, to you. I wanted to kind of talk to you about what it was like with Deck Nine coming in and working in something that was, as you already said, originally started with Don't Nod in France, and you guys are now kind of able to come at it from a perspective of a studio that's based in the United States. It's telling a story about, American kids, and I'm wondering how you preserved Don't Nod's vision, but also kind of brought your own authenticity, your own spin to the story in Before the Storm.
Yeah, I mean, really every day our primary concern was that we were living up to the original game, because we knew the fans out there were really passionate about it, and they cared, and they wanted to see those same characters and some new characters that felt true to that spirit. Other than that, our writers just tried to be as honest and sincere as Ashley was describing, as honest and sincere with our characters and our story as Don't Nod were with theirs.
I should have started with this, but let me give some background on Before the Storm. I mean, maybe Chris, you could tell me a little bit about the overall vision of what Before the Storm was trying to accomplish as a whole, and also give us an update on where the studio stands right now, because the bonus episode is not available yet, correct?
No, right. So so Before the Storm is a 3-episode prequel to the original Life is Strange that Don't Nod created. And it takes the character of Chloe Price, who was sort of the main non-player character in the first game,
the original, right,
and makes her our protagonist, and you play as Chloe 3 years before the events of the first game, and you get to see the blossoming of a relationship that you heard about in that first game between Chloe and Rachel Amber. And so it's a 3-episode series, as I said. First 2 episodes are out. The third one is coming out next week.
Look at that timing. It's like you guys came here for a purpose.
Funny how that happens.
No.
Ashley, let me let me turn to you. What have you brought from role to role in your career as an actor specifically? And, how do you feel like you've grown, and how does that growth influence your performance from role to role?
I think the thing that I try to always be conscious of when I'm approaching a role is being as honest and as vulnerable as I can be. I think that, in the case of Chloe in the original Life is Strange, and then of course Aloy in Horizon, they're both really complex characters that have gone through a number of frankly traumatic things, and they're extremely human. And so I think to portray those characters honestly requires me to investigate those things in myself, the ways that we're connected, and also I'm not a method actor, so I don't feel like I become Chloe or become Aloy. But I think that
Not yet.
I mean, if robot dinosaurs show up, who knows? But I always try to approach characters through empathy. So I don't feel like I necessarily become them, but through understanding them and relating to them, I feel for them. So like, for example, in the infamous junkyard scene in the original Life is Strange, and I've told this story before, but Hannah, who plays Max, Hannah Tell, who plays Max, and I were genuinely crying in the booth. And for me, part of that was obviously portraying Chloe in the scene, but also I'd come to care about Chloe so much that my heart was breaking for her in that moment. So I think empathy is definitely a big part of it. And I forgot the second part of your question. What have I learned, I think, right?
Apparently, I forgot also.
What have I learned, I think? I have, the more that I voice act, it feels sort of silly, but I still speak very quickly, but I go slower. And I think I go slower in terms of how I absorb scenes, literally how I speak. I think when I was younger, I would I would just want to give whatever I needed to give quickly, and there would be like kind of a nervous energy. But I think as I grow a little bit more comfortable, I find that, I am also searching more for collaboration. So I'm more vocal about thoughts that I have, and I really relish back and forths and more direct collaborations with developers and directors, just because I think that's important. And if you're not treating it as a true collaboration, then I think that there are things that both sides are going to miss from the performance. So I definitely take things slower. I ask more questions. I vocalize myself more, and I think ultimately we end up getting richer products out of the deal.
Out of the deal of emotion. Chris, before I return to you, I do want to follow up on one thing, Ashley, you mentioned, which is the vulnerability that comes through playing, you're playing characters. And I think one thing that gamers and just an audience in general doesn't think about is when we watch something or play something, we laugh, we cry, we experience these emotions. You have to imagine that the person that's giving that performance and inhabiting the role in that moment is feeling that, 5, 10-fold. I'm not going to put a number on it, but how do you as an individual then also, is that putting an emotional strain and a drain on you because you are stepping into, as you say, traumatic situations that you have to embody for a moment and then you have to step away? But, do you find that that's influencing and impacting your emotional balance on, and personal as well, personal life?
I find that, sometimes it can be like, I think it's an interesting part of being an actor that, emotional self-care is actually like part of, in the same way that if you're a runner, you have to stretch.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, it's an interesting and sort of strange aspect of being an actor. I'll also say that it can be very healing. Playing Chloe in particular, like I've lost people in my life, just like she has, and people that were too young to go and that kind of thing. And so there was, in certain scenes, it was kind of like, as Chloe was working through her grief, I was working through my grief. And so there is something that can also be really cathartic about those moments. But yeah, you also have to be aware of like taking care of yourself. And I definitely like didn't go out to like a party and like hung out with a bunch of people after my Life is Strange sessions. I went home, had a cup of tea, you know.
just have to decompress
totally.
a bit. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And Chris, then speaking of, catharsis and emotional resonance that Ashley is describing, how does your studio balance the need to create a, narrative fabric, but also take into account the fact that this is interactive and you have a player that's also engaging with this and changing the pacing and changing the setting in which they are seeing these specific scenes? I mean, how do you guys take that into account when you're designing?
Yeah, you're right. It's one of the great challenges I think that we have. Sometimes narrative, especially really emotional, dramatic moments, can kind of strain against interactivity and gameplay. Sometimes it's hard to have both. But we look for sort of special moments to embody the emotions of the characters in gameplay. So. We have a moment, our moment in the junkyard in Before the Storm, where Chloe's furious with a baseball bat smashing things, but we let the player take control there, and everything she looks at has 4 verbs on it saying smash, 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 smash on it, and we thought that sort of showed through the interface of the game, where she's normally trying to be very neutral, kind of displayed her emotions for the player to kind of now take them on board, and I think made for a pretty effective moment. So that's one example.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing about game design in general, is that UI is something that you don't have in books or film or pretty much any other medium, and UI can often be like the total underdog of conveying a piece of story or a moment, as you say, like having smash on all the corners of the screen. I mean, do you are there other moments where you feel like you play with the things that are specific to video games to tell your story?
Well, absolutely. I mean, obviously, our game is so much about choice and consequence, and we look to make those choices as interesting as we can, and as agonizing, frankly, as we can. And that can come down to some very precise tricks of wording and how we choose to what we choose to present you with when it comes to those choices. We'll sometimes fiddle with the individual little words just to make sure we're kind of tilting or biasing the player one way or another, or counteracting some bias we think they might be coming into, so we can make that decision just as difficult as possible, essentially.
Cruel and devious,
basically,
plotting in the background. Ashley, I was wondering how your experience with writing and narrative, plays or informs your acting as well. Do you find that there's a lot of learning from both sides that you take into the field, or?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I do find that I care a lot about character psychology, obviously, being an actor, but that informs my writing tremendously, and then can also make me annoying in the booth. Like, potentially like, would this happen in this moment, or would this character do this? I mean, that's something that actors, do and should do anyway. But
and then the writers are all like, "Oh God, what have we done?"
But it's I'm very, very conscious of it, and I actually had a really cool experience on the Frozen Wilds DLC, in that we were able to, before going into mocap and voice record, have conversations about Aloy's relationship to the new characters in this DLC, and a lot of discussion specifically about how she will interact with Aurea, who is one of the major new characters in the DLC. And I had a lot of back and forth with Ben McCaw, who's the head writer of the DLC, and how would Aloy treat this person who's extremely spiritual, because Aloy's pretty skeptical of that, but she's also very curious and a genuinely compassionate person. And so I think those kinds of conversations are definitely informed by my writing. And I think also it helps because I tend to, or I try to, hopefully I like fear devs being like but I try to I'm very conscious that there is a story in a game that is much larger than just my part of it when I'm performing. So and I'm also conscious of like the experience, because I game as well, the experience of the player. And so I never try to like push back on things or ask questions because I'm like afraid of how the performance is going to sound or whatever, but just consciously like, does this connect? I know that the goal of the scene is this, and that if it goes well, if it's executed correctly, that the player will ideally feel this. So how is my performance in that, the piece of that puzzle, how is it, elevating it, or, delivering on the promises of the scene? And so it makes me more aware of the sort of lattice work of the game as a whole.
Well said. And Chris, I'll kind of finish this first round of questions with you. Round one. That's maybe the furthest from the style of Life is Strange as possible. I mean, Life is Strange and Before the Storm are all about details, both in the world and the characters. I was just curious to know how your team and the artists and the designers, I mean, how a lot of those little tiny pieces came together and how those influenced the larger work.
Yeah, you're right. Environmental storytelling is as important as the storytelling we're doing with the characters, especially it rewards players who want to kind of dig deeper. So we kind of go in layers and stages through our scenes. The script gets written and it'll include all the things that the character needs to look at, especially the stuff that's critical for getting through that scene. If there's a puzzle or important characters you have to talk to. But then both the writers and our level designers and environment artists will be thinking about the space, thinking about the characters who live in that space, and also just the balance of objects around the scene to make sure it feels like it's full and not over full, and come up with what are the additional little interactive objects that you'll be able to find, and what can they say about the characters. And that's the biggest thing for us is whenever possible to make sure they really feel relevant and kind of reveal just a little something new that you didn't know before you looked at that object.
What was, for both of you, and again, rock, paper, scissors for order, what for both of you was the greatest challenge working in the world of Life is Strange, and how did you approach and hopefully overcome that challenge?
For us, I think it was just that what Don't Nod had created was so special that we just knew there was a lot of pressure to live up to it. So, as I say, we ask ourselves every day, are we being true to Life is Strange? Are we being true to these characters? Is this the Chloe everybody knows and loves? Are we bringing something new, but still remaining honest to what everyone's expecting and what they love about that character? And that was vigilance every day and thinking very carefully about what we were doing as we went through that process. And we're just really delighted that the fans, it seems like, feel like we managed to hit that mark.
Ashley?
When I realized in the original series that we were heading toward this big choice at the end of the first season, and that the degree to which you connected to Chloe is the determining factor for what choice you make, that's arguably it's a lot of responsibility on the writing and on the performance to make that a difficult choice for players. And I know this that you guys had this too, that you kind of want all the choices to feel like 50-50. You want to feel like every choice that the player has to make is a difficult one.
Unless it's smash on all
Unless it's smash on all of the
no choice
on the UI. But yeah, so I wasn't thinking about that super, super consciously going in, because the most important thing is creating an authentic experience. But I just really wanted to feel like I was being authentic and true to the character that Chloe is. And I was also conscious of not wanting to make her to maintain the idea that even though she can be aggressive and sassy and mischievous and can kind of maybe drag Max around a little bit into adventures that she might not necessarily want to go into.
Nonsense.
That fundamentally she's motivated by a lot of pain and a lot of fear, and for that to be felt and to treat that with care.
Let's go a little more free form at the end of our discussion, our conversation here. We often spend some time talking about things that are not related to video games on this show. So for both of you, what is something that you've read, watched, played, listened to recently that you feel has had a big impact on you? It's totally open-ended. There are no wrong answers. Who wants to go?
When I was younger, I got through the Harry Potters up through Order of the Phoenix when I stopped. So I actually, but this year I went through and I listened to all the audiobooks and then I watched all the movies. So I had a very Harry Potter
in
year.
one day.
In one day.
We've had a similar year then because my daughter got into Harry Potter this year and has been watching the movies nonstop, and so I've been picking them up along with her. And I had never read any of them at all.
Really?
Actually, just
Oh, whoa.
Yeah,
all new to me.
They're pretty remarkable.
They really are.
Yeah, and
Who does the audiobooks, may I ask?
Jim Dale, who
Okay.
is so fantastic. If you are into audiobooks, if you love Harry Potter, I'll say that I think he portrays some of the characters better than the actors in the movie, to be honest.
Hey, watch out. Controversial
I know, very
statement.
controversial. I won't say who
Sounds
because
like a
I feel
voice
like a mob will
actor.
go after me. I know. But yeah, he's fantastic. And The Deathly Hallows right now especially is an interesting reread, given like what's happened this year. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed them. They're just also like, it's so cool to see a franchise develop over the and grow with its audience. So you're literally tackling new subjects and plunging new emotional depths every book. And I can't imagine. I have no idea how J.K. Rowling did it.
I think about that all the
I
time.
know.
How did she do this?
Yeah, it's
I
remarkable.
think she started on a typewriter or something too,
Did she
or some
really?
old computer. I remember her saying in an interview that like the most humble beginnings you could possibly imagine, even in the tools that she was using to
Wow.
write. So the first draft. Chris, what else is in your docket right now that you can share with our audience?
Yeah, earlier this year was the last season of a show called *Halt and Catch Fire* that I think a lot of people maybe haven't watched.
I heard it's great.
It's really good. I think it's AMC, and it's really kind of a slow burn, dramatic show about the beginnings of the tech industry. First season, it's the characters building one of the first IBM PC clones and trying to get into that market. And it's got these characters that kind of feel like they're half archetypes. One maybe has a little bit of a Steve Jobs kind of a feel to him. One's your kind of nerdy engineer, but they get really deep into their lives in a very low key way, but a really believable way. And one of the things I took away from it is how much just the dialogue of a scene and of a show, they really paint the character well. It doesn't need to have necessarily tons of bells and whistles and fireworks exactly, and they have their moments, but it just propels this show along and really gets you into these characters because they feel extremely believable. It's a really great show.
Excellent. Good recommendations. Thank you both. My guests today, again, were Chris Floyd, the co-game director from Deck 9, and also Ashley Birch, actor, writer, voice of Aloy. So third time. Sorry about most of the mentions were from Ashley, by the way. Thank you both so much for joining me today. And then Life is Strange Before the Storm, is it safe to say, is coming to a conclusion in the near future?
Yeah, so the third episode is out December 19th, 20th, depending on where you are in the world when it launches. And then beginning of next year, we'll announce later the exact date, but we have the bonus farewell episode with Ashley voicing young Chloe Price again.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Change your life. You just know it, I guess. Let's leave. For real. Fuck.
Talk to me, Chloe.
I know I fucked up. You don't scare me.
Who are you?
Shit. I've got to help Rachel. Rachel, run! Whatever it takes.
Chloe, go!
Shit!
You're the only one in the world I can trust.
Whatever happens, Rachel, I'm here.